Linda Braun here with Shannon Peterson, and this is one of our sort of monthly, they're almost always monthly, Putting Teens First video chats. And today we're here with Ryan from the Markham Library. He's the community library in Markham in Canada. And Ryan has been doing some really interesting things with youth, with teens, with community, and particularly with youth who have mental health challenges and needs. And so we want to talk to him today about how he's putting teens first. So welcome, Ryan.
Thank you.
Can you tell us about your community?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Markham is a small, I guess, little suburb in Ontario, part of the GTA. So everybody knows where Toronto is, and there's like Toronto, Brampton, Mississauga. We're kind of tucked in there. It's a really cool and unique community in that we're actually the most diverse city in all of Canada.
Wow.
You wouldn't think that, but Markham it's an impressive place. I mean, we have people from all over the world. They're here. You can walk down the street and pretty much try any food, meet someone from literally any walk of life. And I think it's what makes Markham so unique. It also presents a lot of challenges for people like myself when we're developing programming. It's easier when you can kind of know the community at a glance, but people aren't the same here. And we find that, you know, different nationalities, different backgrounds have different feelings, not only towards the library, but towards education and the value of volunteering and work and everything in between. So we're always trying to balance what we think people want and what the community wants. And it kind of makes the job a little more exciting.
That's great.
So why is that diversity happening? Like, what makes you the most diverse city in Canada? That's huge.
You know what? I think Markham has been a city now for a couple of years, but for a long time it was just a town. It was like a small little town. It was a lot of farm. It was a lot of just fields. And I know when my parents came here in 1988, well, they were in Toronto and then they moved here to Markham in 88. There was nothing. There was absolutely nothing, but housing was really cheap. It was much more affordable than pretty much anywhere. And the great thing about Markham, it's right on the border of Toronto. So literally there's a road it's Steele's Road. You can actually be on Markham on one side, hop over to the next, and now you're in Toronto. So for a lot of people who were working in Toronto or needed easy access to public transit, the highways, being in Markham provided that. The more north you go, the more kind of cut off you are from the rest of the GTA and the surrounding cities. So Markham was just in a prime location. And then we have a mayor who's pretty smart dude. And he just saw the need to build up the infrastructure that we have. We became the high-tech capital of Ontario. So when we're talking about Microsoft, IBM, all sorts of major companies, they've decided to have their head office here in Markham. And it has a little bit to do with like the taxes and all that fun stuff. But I think it really just became a spot for opportunity for a lot of people. And because so many different groups started coming in, you started to see these pockets develop. So you have your Persian community in maybe our Thornhill Community Center area. You have our South Asian community down here in Milliken, and it's been able to grow. So people feel at home. You know, you're not moving to a community where you feel like, man, no one here looks like me, has the same beliefs as me. It's shared. There's somewhere in Markham for literally absolutely anybody.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
That is awesome.
Yeah. That's great. So in that community, so actually tell us a little bit now if Shannon started that's awesome. So tell us a little bit about the teens in your community and then a bit about the work you're doing with them. Yeah.
So Markham has parents that are highly educated and they value education. That's plain and simple. I find the challenge is they value university education as opposed to college, which can sometimes be a challenge for students. So when we're talking about teens specifically in Markham, they're stressed. From the stats that we have, from the research that we've been able to do at a citywide level, like they are stressed out. They're concerned about what jobs they're going to be able to get after they go to school. They're concerned about even if they're going to be able to get into school. How are they going to pay for it? Are they ever going to be able to find a place to live? You know, the housing situation right now in Toronto, Markham, this whole area, it's absolutely bonkers. More people are just living at home. More students are saying, hey, you know what? I'm never going to be able to have a place on my own. I might as well just stay home with my parents, spend money on whatever else it is. And it's putting a lot of stress on them. You know, financial literacy is something that not a lot of teens in the area have. You know, they don't know how to manage their money, which can lead to a whole lot of other issues. Mental health is a significant problem that we're encountering. People just don't know how to take care of themselves. You know, these students are, and it's not just high school students, it's not just teens. We're talking about children in grade school. They're going to school for the entire day. They are then leaving school, coming either to the library or to a Sylvan, a Kumon, a learning center to do extra tutoring. Man, they're not getting home till like 8, 9 o'clock. And by the time they get home, and they still have homework to do. And it's just perpetuating. It goes on and on. And as a result, from just the feedback we get when we have teens at the library, they just don't know what to do. A lot of the times they're stressed out. They don't know what resources are available to them, who to turn to. Right now I was just upstairs in the branch, and it is packed. It's packed full of university students just kind of cramming for midterms, whatever it is. And when you have these conversations with them and I say, hey, how long have you been here? And they've said, well, I was here since the branch opened. I'm going to be going home when the branch closes. And when I get home, I got to keep studying. Mm-hmm. You're like, you don't make time for yourself. You're not eating properly. You know, it's just back and forth with coffee. And with all that in mind, you know, as community librarians, it's our duty really to help provide them with support, help provide them with resources, either as a bridge, you know, connecting people to what's out there or bringing the services to them.
Yeah. So Ryan, just to jump in with a simple question, like you mentioned you're looking at sort of community data and anxiety levels with youth. Like where are you finding that data, and like what kind of discussions are you having internally to kind of unpack that and understand it?
So I don't know how much I can say about like environics that we have. There's kind of, really isn't too much we can say for confidentiality, but we pull some data from just surveys that we do in the community, whether it's the city of Markham or surveys that we do directly. But a lot of it too is community conversations. So we invite the public to come out, we do focus groups, and we just talk to them. We get their opinion on where Markham is going, what they're worried about. We do it with different age groups. You know, we have focus groups for teens, for seniors, for adults. And it's interesting to hear some of the similarities about what they're concerned Markham was going to look like in the next few years. But then, you know, you have these parents that are saying, I'm worried that my child will not have a place to live outside of, you know, our house. And heaven forbid something happens to us. What does my child do? Or I'm worried they're going to be in debt. They're never going to be able to work out of it. And then you go talk to the teens and it's literally the same thing. It's like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. I have no idea. You know, people keep saying that I have to go to school and that's just the best option. Everything else will kind of work itself out. So you have these teens that are just kind of going through the motions, not really knowing whether or not what they're doing is actually going to pay off for them in the long run. And doing those community conversations, those focus groups, that's what's been so valuable in getting that information.
Is that something new that your system or your library has been doing, or is that kind of built into, well, I guess it's not necessarily one or the other, but is that kind of built into your regular like practice and systems?
Yeah, it wasn't
to support that, or is that just something that's an expectation of like how you do your job?
Well, I mean, for us, we have our strategic plan, and part of it is, you know, serving the community, and that's going to change year to year. So for me, like in my role, I focus on digital literacy and then also mental health, special needs programming. So it's kind of like two opposite areas, but they're both passions of mine. And it's stuff that evolves. So I'm doing that this year, and next year, those two topics may look a little different. You know, this year I've really been focusing on special needs programming because I keep hearing from the community, hey, there's nothing out there. We don't have workshops. We don't have programs. We don't have free stuff. If you take a look, and I do regularly, I kind of research what some of the municipalities are doing around us, and it is really expensive. If you have an adult dependent and you want to put them in a special needs program, it is ridiculously expensive. I don't know how people are supposed to be able to afford to pay that. So for us, we're able to kind of look beyond what's happening in Markham and say, okay, what can we do right now? You know, this is a need in our community. How can we adapt? How can the library play a role? And that's why I've been putting together workshops and programs that are free. You know, and so right now we're developing this model where we want to have just continuous programs for special needs individuals. Next year, it could be something different. Next year, it could be more of a focus on adults who have mental health issues as opposed to the teen mental health issues. So it always changes. But for us as a library, our goal is always to support the community. And the only way we can do that is if we actually connect with them and find out what it is that they need.
So Ryan, when you have those community conversations, do you go to where people are? And I guess I'm also wondering how you decide who you're going to talk to. Right?
Yeah. So, I mean, we try and get a little bit of everybody. Like I said, we do teen, we do adult, we do seniors. We try and make use of our existing volunteer pool. So we have about, I'd say like over 1,000 volunteers in our pool. So it doesn't mean that they're all active volunteers, but they're in the pool. And so what we'll do sometimes is send out an email and say, hey, you know, we have these focus groups that we're running either at the library, we've done them out in the community at restaurants, cafes, different places, and say, hey, you're more than welcome to come. We just want to hear from you. And we get great response. We get great feedback from people because it's an opportunity for them to actually contribute and have a say in what the library is doing, right? I find just too often we get caught up in thinking we know what's best. We need to stop and realize, hey, we are here to serve a community. Let's actually hear from the community first, find out whether or not this makes sense to do rather than us spending money and time and hours doing something that they turn around and say, we don't really care too much about that. So it can be tricky to get going to really identify those groups who want to come out, but you will find that you have those advocates in your community, people who are already engaged citizens. And once you just give them a platform, an opportunity to have their voice heard, you know, they're going to start sharing that within their network, and you start to see more and more people come out.
So actually now, okay, Shannon, sorry, you start talking. I started first.
We're full of questions.
Yeah, right, because now you're making me think. So then how do you decide what to do with that information that you gather from the community? You know, because you can't just go out and say, hey, what do you want? And then go back and do whatever. How do you guys decide what to do with what you gather?
What we try and do is have more central themes. So if we go out and we keep hearing from people, you know, let's say financial literacy, for example, you know, we're hearing from teens that I don't know how to save. I don't know what to do to pay for university, to pay for college or a car or whatever it is, or I'm in credit card debt. And then we go and we talk to adults and they're talking about, I don't think I'm going to be able to pay off my mortgage. And then we go and we're speaking to seniors and they're saying, you know what, I did not save enough for retirement. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. So you kind of see, all right, so clearly saving, that financial literacy is a common theme throughout all those different age groups. So for us, we can go back and start to say, okay, you know, we're hearing from more and more people across different age groups that this is a concern, that this is an area of need. And then we can figure out, okay, how can we work that into our programming? So for myself, I'm one of 6 community librarians, and each community librarian has a different role. So we have someone who focuses on business and entrepreneurship, civic engagement, newcomers and settlement, health and wellness, and creative expression. So everything we do kind of finds a way of fitting in with one of those roles. And it's great because, like, for the financial literacy theme, like I was talking about, we were able to pass that on to one of our colleagues, and now she's been organizing these amazing free workshops for all sorts of people, and they've been well attended. People have been enjoying them. And that all comes, like I said, from just the discussions you have with your community.
Yeah. So, you know, I guess I have a couple questions. I'm going to start with this one. So, like, getting people to talk about, like, I can't pay my mortgage, like, you know, those are deeply, like, personal and, like, tough topics, I think, for people to feel open talking about. So how do you kind of build that trust, and, like, what questions are you thinking about, and how do you get people to that place where they're comfortable talking about those things? Well,
it's interesting. So I sit beside our research analyst, and he always asks me, who do people trust the most? And you give it kind of, you know, maybe doctors, lawyers. No, he goes, it's not that. He goes, it's public libraries. For as many years as you can imagine, people trust public libraries. There's something about them. They know we're here to serve. They know we're not here with an agenda. And I find that exists when we go out in the community as well. The outreach team that we have, phenomenal. They're absolutely amazing. And they're people who have the ability to develop these relationships in short periods of time with the people that they meet. So it's amazing when we go out and we think maybe we're just doing outreach at a festival or at an event, and you just start having a conversation with someone. Last night, I was talking to a young lady who was here, and it was simply me asking her, oh, you know, are you from the area? That ended up leading to just a long talk about how she was originally from Michigan, and her mom was writing a PhD thesis on segregation in Detroit in the 60s. And I mean, we're building on this conversation, and you're like, wow. You know, there's some people have so many stories. There's such rich information people have, and they're willing to share it, but they only want to share it if they feel like, obviously, there's that trust there. You know, when you're approaching them from a library, you already have a little bit of trust. What you have to do next is really just make the effort to develop that relationship, right? Not just make it seem like you're there trying to gain something for your own like betterment, you are there to actually support them. It's getting them to understand, hey, you know what, we want to develop programs. We want to make sure our services are appropriate for everybody. The only way we can do that is by hearing from people like you. And when you explain that, when you start to have that conversation, you see, you know, as people say, like the layers of the onion start to peel off, and you're getting to really what people want to talk about. Sometimes they're just a little more hesitant.
Yeah. And so you're getting, like, you're engaging people in like helping you identify ideas.
Yep.
Are you working with the community to actually like design the programs as well, or is it, or how are they involved in that like sort of loop of, you know,
Yep.
identification, design, iteration?
Yeah, so we have worked with some of our community members in the past to develop some of our programs. Normally what ends up happening though is it won't necessarily be community members, but community partners. So different organizations that are in the area. A lot of the special needs work that I do, it kind of got started from a conversation I had with one mom who has a teenage son with autism. And she said, hey, there's this great organization. I really think you should contact them. I did. They're right down the street from us. I had no idea they were there. And it's led to such great work. So it won't always be the individuals unless maybe they are just, you know, extremely motivated. We have one retired professor who lives in Markham, and he actually comes out and he does this big questions philosophy meetup for us. He facilitates it himself. He designs the content. So we do want to provide that opportunity to people when possible. It's not something we do regularly. We prefer to kind of work with community partners because at least we know there's a bit more of a commitment, right? If we have a program with someone and it's them from the community, or we're relying on them, and then there is an incident in the family, there's an illness in the family, whatever it may be, and they say, you know, I have to step back now, I can't contribute, then that puts us at a disadvantage. So that's why we try and gain all the insight we can up front, gain as much knowledge as possible, and then use that when we're working with local partners and community organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna add, so we've been talking about getting the program started, but now
Yep.
I'm also wondering, like, how do you assess success? So like you're saying the financial literacy programs or whatever are really successful. Yep. So how do you decide that? Is it numbers? Is it observation? Is it interviews? More focus groups? What kinds of things do you do?
I think it has to be a little mix of both. So we have outcome measurements and surveys that we send out. So once any program we have is complete, we send an email directly to the participants, and the survey is usually customized based on what the like learning objectives are. Mm-hmm. So if it's something where it's lifelong learning, you know, the questions are more tailored versus if it's about financial literacy, let's say. But it's important to get that feedback on paper, on surveys when you can, and just give them the opportunity to air out their thoughts. But then it's also essential that you have just the conversations with them. And that's what I always try and do after any program that I facilitate. I make myself available and I say, hey, if you have any feedback, please feel free to come on up. We do it all the time with staff training. You know, about maybe 2-3 weeks ago, we had a full week of staff training regarding teen services. And at the end of the training, we just said, hey, whether it was good, whether it was bad, come on up and tell us. And we got amazing feedback. And each day we were able to improve for the next training and the next training. So you're just letting people know that you're there to gain their insight and their feedback, whether it's good or bad. I mean, it's the best thing for you, right? I think you don't want people coming to a program being like, oh man, this sucks, leaving, taking that information with them, you sitting there being like, this is the best thing we've ever done. Right. Next thing you know, you offer it again and nobody shows up, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so you iterate all the time. Like you just said that the team training, getting that feedback, yep. You're able to make changes along the way so that it was more responsive to what people were needing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we make a big mistake thinking that what we do ends up being perfect. I don't think anything we do is ever perfect. I think there's always room for improvement. But I think it takes a willingness from the person developing the content, facilitating the content, to say, hey, I may not be doing this the way I could be or the way I should be. The only way you're going to find out that was actually hearing from people, right? So yeah, we try and do that with anything we have. And whether it's myself, my colleagues, anyone in the library, any program we teach, from story time to a financial literacy program, we are there and say, hey, let us know what you think. Please, you can tweet us, you can email us, you can fill out the survey, or you can just come have a chat. And people want to do that because they want to make sure that their opinion is heard.
Shannon,
I
what do you
think that's such an
think?
important point, Ryan, with outcomes. Like, I think a lot of people feel like fear, trepidation, like, God, I have to know
Yeah.
how to analyze this stuff and I have to create spreadsheets and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, just being intentional about like putting it out there and telling people, like, come talk to me about it. This is all about improvement. Like,
Yeah.
that's probably the first and easiest thing that you can do.
And it's
also,
okay.
go ahead.
Sorry, go
Ryan.
ahead. Man. Oh, I,
No,
I was just going to say, it's okay to not know as well. I think people are always really scared about, facilitating a program. Let's say it is a teen mental health program. And it's happened to me in the past, absolutely, where a teen will ask me a question and I'm like, whoa, crap. I don't have an answer. I don't know what to do. And you kind of freeze a little bit. But as time went on and I started to learn, hey, it's not an opportunity to just stand there and say, honestly, I don't know. It's a chance to work together as a group. You say, well, you know what? I'm not too sure, but like, does anyone else have any ideas? Does anyone else have any opinions on that? And then you can turn that question into just a group discussion and you can arrive at a good answer. You can arrive at a place where the person who asked that question is satisfied with the feedback, with what they have heard. And you can do that pretty much anytime. So I think as long as staff know that they're not going to know everything every single time, that isn't always indicative of them not having a quality program. I think that's what happens to a lot of people is you think someone comes out and if you're not able to answer the program, then right away it's a bad program or people won't enjoy it. That's not the case, right? If you're honest with people though, and at least say, hey, I'm not too sure, I can get back to you. Why don't you pass me your email? People are going to be like, hey, like that's awesome. You're taking the time to reach out to me to actually provide me with the right answer. But it all comes down to just that individual's willingness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it can be scary to think, oh, I might not have this right. I'm going to do this thing and it might not work the way I thought it was going to, which I think is a fear that a lot of people have. But actually, if you start doing that, your programs just get better and better and more responsive to what people need. So it's a really powerful thing.
Well, and that's also part of why I think the outcomes focus is so important. Like if you're focusing on the big picture of what you're trying to achieve, it becomes a lot easier to think of different ways to achieve that, as you mentioned, Ryan, than just like you standing there and knowing everything, which is never going to happen.
And it also becomes easier to decide what to do or not do, right? So
I'll tell you, one of my just all-time favorite programs that I've ever done at the library, something called Get With It. I started it with a colleague of mine, Liz Myers, and she actually really kind of got it rolling. I came in as support and then I took it over. And it was an intimidating program. You're talking about a group of like 10 to 15 youth that have been taking out of, they're out of school, they're out of high school because the board doesn't think that that's a good environment for them, conducive to learning and to their mental health. So now they're sitting in front of you. They are clinically depressed. They're suffering from anxiety. The list goes on and on. These are typically reserved individuals. And at the start, we were always like, man, how do we connect with them? What do we do? And we realized very, very early on that you had to shift from us thinking that we were up there to lecture to us being up there to just, really just keep that conversation flowing. The favorite, oh man, when I think about it, it honestly just makes me laugh. One of the topics that we would discuss was teen sexual health. And it was like super taboo. It's usually not something that you talk about in a library, but we had these amazing child and youth workers that were there to share their insight. And, we created this environment with the teens to say, hey, we know you have a lot of questions. We are here to help provide support. Maybe not all the answers, but we're here for you. We want to support you. So they would they would write down questions before they came to class. And it was bonkers. Like some of the questions that they had, it really goes to show how like innocent some of these teens are. Like we have these preconceived notions that, teens are sleeping around, that teens are doing all sorts of bad stuff. And then they're asking you questions. You're like, oh my goodness. Like you just want to hug them. Like they're so innocent. You realize like they're still kids. They're still children in there. And it was such a great learning experience for us, but it's been one of our most successful programs because it's really allowed the teens to come out of their shell. There's just something about the way we facilitate it, the way we present the content, cultivate the content. It's engaging for them. It doesn't feel like they're in school and they've enjoyed it. And I know, I think I've shared in the past during one of the webinars that I did, some of the success stories from it. And I want to encourage other library staff to take those chances, right? Talking about sexual health in a library, for a lot of people, they would never imagine doing it. But sometimes it's taking that chance. That's what allows you to support, an at-risk group who really needs it. And they go from seeing the library as a place that just has books to a place that cares about them, a place that wants to be there for them, a place where they can go have fun, but stimulating conversations, right? And I honestly think any library can do that.
And I love that you did that with a coworker and also outside youth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Community people, because it's not something you have to do on your own. Like you don't say, I'm going to do a teen sexual health program and I'm going to answer all the questions. No.
Yep. Right.
You bring in the experts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Other questions, Shannon?
We could like make it a record breaker and talk for a
Keep
day
it
and a
going.
half, but we should probably. I guess, Ryan, is there anything else that you would want to share with the YALSA community about, how you've learned and grown in your career and steps that others can take to kind of be brave in the ways that you have been?
You know what? I think two things. The first one is a super cheesy quote, but I know people love quotes. I'm biggest fan of Boy Meets World. And Mr. Feeney was my second father growing up, right? He's number one. And series finale of that show, all the kids, I say kids, but all, Corey, Topanga, they all come back to class and they ask him for advice, like parting words. What does he tell them? And one of the last things he says is do good. And Topanga, of course, like, oh, don't you mean do well? And he's like, no. And as a kid, I didn't get it. As a kid, that flew over my head. I now have that literally tattooed on my arm as like a constant reminder that that's what we have the opportunity to do every single day. And that kind of leads me to the advice I can give is find out what your strengths are and as much as possible, work to enhance them. At the same time, you're trying to enhance the weaknesses that you have. So if you're a great public speaker, keep looking for those opportunities. Be a public speaker, facilitate programs, do everything you can. But if you absolutely suck at responding to emails or, coordinating meetings, whatever it is, work on that every day too. Don't just allow your strengths to be the only thing that defines you, because then you end up being almost like a one-trick pony, right? Hey, yeah, we can call Ryan in and he'll do a great presentation, but don't ever ask him to send an email because he sucks at it. You don't want to be that person, and you don't want to be known as that person, whether it's at your library in the library world. So it takes a lot of kind of self-reflection to say, hey, what can I improve on? What areas do I know I need to improve on to be a better librarian, to be a better person in the community? Any way you can improve yourself is only going to improve how you support your community. I think that's what it boils down to. Just don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to take chances. Don't be afraid to ask questions. So often, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I feel like a lot of the library people I talk to, especially up here, there's such hesitation to just take a chance, right? What we end up doing is we kind of go, okay, they're doing that. Okay, they're doing that. I'm just going to do the same kind of thing. It's easier. No, stop doing that. Because if they're already doing it, what's the point? Don't waste time trying to do the exact same thing. Start thinking outside the box. Talk to your community. Spend time understanding what it is that your community wants, right? And then what ends up happening from that is quality programming, quality services that reflect your community. And really, you end up making library advocates for the rest of their life.
But Ryan, I talked to you many times now, and you are continually an inspiration.
It's always a pleasure.
For the way you think about things and how you serve your community. So thank you so much for doing this.